Welcome, I'm Brian the Builder, and in this video I am going to be modeling my version of Han Solo encased in carbonite to go along with my Boba Fett Bandai 112 model kit. The Boba Fett video is a separate piece, but I really did want something to kind of go along with that as a companion piece that was a bit more custom than the model kit out of the box. The model kit out of the box is amazing, and it doesn't really need any additional weaponry or anything else. So this seemed like the logical kind of companion to me. Fortunately, instead of modeling Han Solo's face and dealing with any issues of copyright infringement with his likeness or anything else, I'm going to use a digital scan of my own face that I will essentially have already used a past kind of project where I had completely rigged my whole face. And I was able to use 3ds Max's snapshot tool to essentially take a copy of my face in a pose where I looked rather unhappy. So it looks similar to the Han Solo face in the background, but being that it is my own face, I suppose, have to put something in there as kind of a block that represents teeth. But once it's that tiny, you'll never really be able to see anything, but I should at least have something in there so it doesn't have just liquid resin in there. And then beyond that, the rest of this whole structure is actually a really simple box. And every one of these panels is actually the exact same frame with slightly different pieces in these insert sections. So the overall outer structure for all 8 of them, right, there's 4 on each side, is the same. And these images come from Sideshow Collectibles' version of this. They also have a life-size version of it, which someday would be really cool to have hanging on the wall, but probably not going to ever be able to afford it. It's kind of insane. But it looks to me like these are old, like, rack audio equipment parts, or maybe video equipment, like oscilloscopes and stuff like that, that were essentially kit bashed by the Star Wars guys into stuff that just looked more greebly on the side of this thing, which in the film you never really got a good look at in Empire. So it is, I hope, going to be relatively straightforward to create the outer structure, and then some minor modification bits to go in those to give it some variety along the side. And then, I'm not quite sure about how I'm going to build a stand, but I think it might just be good for it to stand up similar to this, next to Boba Fett. So it'll be stable, you'll be able to see me encased in carbonite, which will be really entertaining. So, let's get to it. definitely seems to be like there's something strange going on with those polygons that I need to try to figure out before I really go any further. Alright, so I sorted out the issue. It seems as though between the inset and me pushing these edges out to the side to make room for these side panels, I seem to have overlapped basically these edges along the side. So once I went in and basically just moved these vertices out to allow those polygons to not be overlapping, everything's pretty happy. The hands are going to be pretty straightforward. The body itself's pretty straightforward. My only concern is having enough detail to get a lot of this texture. So I think after it's a very, very basic model, and the body chunk and the arms don't all even have to be continuous. It's going to be a bunch of separate pieces that overlap. And then I can kind of just use Max's sculpting tools. I'm not going to go into ZBrush. I don't think I need to get that detailed. I'll try a test print and see what happens. I don't think I need to get that detailed. I think everything I'm going to be able to do is going to be just fine in Max. So, we'll see. thinking that's looking pretty cool. Let's make some hands. The hands shouldn't really be too challenging. I think the more challenging part here is going to be to make sure that the fingers stay kind of actually in a pose that's similar enough to this where it's super recognizable, but also where the fingers are large enough to not just break off when everything's removed. And support should never touch these fingers, but when it's all said and done, I want the fingers probably to be fused together. We'll see. I'll model them as individual fingers. It'll work out better that way. Probably easier, actually. But yeah, I don't know about 3D printing at this scale. Having individual fingers and the little thumbs sticking up, it's definitely going to be very fragile. So we'll see what happens. So the last thing I need to do here is to just add basically the little greebly bits that go along these panels. And as far as I can tell, like there are little handles on each edge that are going to have to be minimal at best as far as handles go. There's going to be something sticking up, but it won't be able to be much. But most of this detail is going to be relatively low surface detail, so it should be pretty quick and easy to replicate this outer piece as a template. And then the other ones really only have slightly different interior like details. So for the most part, these are going to be the same. And again, just minor differences. Some of that will be in paint, and some of that will actually be just a few different little, well, I think these will just be tortoises that'll be partially embedded into the surface. So should be pretty quick. All right, so we'll crank those out. All right, so I'm just gonna get that clear a little bit so that I can go ahead. Let's freeze it and build this basic panel on top of it. I'm just gonna go, at least to start with here, with some basic rectangles because this is a square shape. I didn't bother rounding the corners of this. It's gonna be really tiny. So we're just gonna make basically a rectangle. And if I turn off start new shape, I can just make nested shapes on the inside, since these appear to all basically be different. Well, these two look the same. So then I'm going to go to modify panel. I'm going to go to modify, and then I'm going to just duplicate that one. Alright, as that finishes, I think the last thing to do, because that looks really cool, It's a pretty cool homage to a really great movie. So I'm really happy with this. There's, things that aren't perfect, of course, but at the scale that it's going to be printed at and displayed at, I don't think you'll notice any. There's a weird little seam in the neck because the head and the body are two different pieces. But I think that'll be very easy to actually fix with just a little bit of epoxy sculpt once it's a physical object. So the idea that I can start in 3D and still add things once it's in the physical world is pretty awesome. So I'm going to get this sent over to my printer, and I'll be back at the workbench, hopefully with a physical object, in just a second. All right, well, as you can see, everything printed up really, really well. The details on the sides are absolutely fantastic. They're really crisp. Probably going to be hard for you to see the little circles. It's so low contrast right now. Everything's just gray. But it did have to be printed in 2 pieces, obviously. Number one, I need to go back into 3ds Max and hollow everything, because these 2 things as solid chunks of resin is foolish and wasteful, and really just because I was rushing. And as you can see, it's printed in 2 halves. It had to be in order to be able to fit inside my printer, so it's just sliced in half in 3ds Max and then sent to the printer. I am going to go back and actually adjust my 3ds Max file before I make this available as a printed piece for anyone, just because it is foolish as far as the amount of resin that it actually uses. That said, it's pretty awesome anyway. The bottom of this piece did actually warp slightly in printing, so I sanded it down a little, and they still don't meet perfectly. But once they're glued, a little bit of epoxy putty in there, and that will be absolutely invisible once it's all painted up. It is essentially supposed to be a rough surface in any of this space anyway, and then the sides here will be actually really easy to sand smooth. So I'm going to get this glued together, and then we're going to get it all filled and sanded and painted. The filling, sanding, and painting will probably be a part of the Boba Fett project, but I'm going to get it glued up right now. Alright, now I have a plastic bag from something. I have no idea what this is from. It could have been any number of things. But this underneath should be able to be released once the super glue sets up. So if it doesn't release perfectly, I'm not too overly concerned. That will peel off. Alright, so now got nice flat sides, so this should clamp really nice. Just want to make sure that the sides are nicely aligned. Should be nice and flat. Now, there's quite a gap to fill, but the gap is not really an issue. We got lots of stuff we can fill a gap with. And the edge isn't quite perfect, but it's really good. And once that's standing on a shelf, I don't think you're going to notice the slight imperfections here. We'll be able to sand and adjust that gap. That's kind of nuts. Alright, so again, nothing's perfect. Nothing I do is perfect. I don't tend to worry too much about that. We're here to have some fun, and this is a really fun piece. So, there's a little work to do, obviously, to finish this up, but it is a very, very cool, very entertaining scale replica of the Carbonite system used to freeze Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. Now, that's not Han Solo, right? It's me. So, if anyone out there is looking for a replica of themselves encased in Carbonite, you feel free to send me a message, and if we can find a way to get a digital scan of your face, I'll find a way to get a price figured out for getting something like this custom made for anyone who wants something like this. All right, so that's going to be it for this video. I appreciate your time. Don't forget to hit the like button. Please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming up. And remember, once again, even this thing, though it's not quite ready, will be available on Etsy to purchase. And again, if there's anyone who would like a custom version with their own face so that they have their own option of having themselves encased in Carbonite, and trust me, it's pretty entertaining to have yourself encased in Carbonite. It's pretty cool. So let me know, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.